Someone backhands you across the face. In front of everyone, the insult lands, the room goes quiet, and you feel it. The heat in your face, the roar in your chest, the voice in your head that says, hit back, right now, make them pay. That is the moment this verse is about. Turn the other cheek. You have heard those words 100 times, and they probably call up the same picture every time. Someone standing there, taking it, someone who lets the insult land and does nothing, the doormat. And if you have ever been told to turn the other cheek by someone who is not the one being hurt, you know exactly how that picture feels. It feels like weakness dressed up as virtue. And maybe you have wondered, quietly, whether Jesus actually meant it, whether this verse is really asking you to be walked on. But here is something worth sitting with for a moment. The people who first heard Jesus say those words did not picture a doormat. They would have understood something far more surprising, something that had nothing to do with passivity. And the clue is hiding in one small detail that almost everyone walks right past. Jesus did not say, if someone slaps you, he said, if someone slaps you on your right cheek. Why the right cheek? That one detail changes everything. And once you see it, you will never hear this verse the same way again. But to see it, we need to go back to a mountain, a crowd, and a teacher who kept saying the same two phrases over and over. You have heard that it was said. But I tell you, let me set the scene. The year is roughly AD 28 or 29. A young teacher from Nazareth has been walking through Galilee, and the reports have spread ahead of him. He heals the sick. He teaches with an authority people have never felt before. And the crowds are growing, not just curious onlookers. People with real needs, real questions, real desperation. And one day he climbs a hill above the Sea of Galilee, sits down, and begins to teach. His disciples gather close. The crowds press in around them. You can almost hear the place. The wind off the water, the murmur of 1,000 voices. And what follows is the most famous sermon ever given. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. It runs from Matthew chapter 5 through chapter 7. Now here is what is easy to miss. This is not a random collection of wise sayings. It is a carefully built argument. Jesus sits down, the teaching position of a rabbi, and he begins dismantling the way people have been reading their own scriptures, not because the scriptures are wrong, because the readings have gone shallow, and he does it with a pattern. 6 times he says the same thing. You have heard that it was said. Then he quotes what people were saying. And then he says, but I tell you. Take the first one. You have heard that it was said, do not murder. And Jesus pushes it deeper. He says, in effect, if you are angry with your brother, your heart is already in danger. He is not loosening the commandment. He is driving it down into the heart. Second, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. And Jesus pushes that deeper too. He says, in effect, if you look with lust, the sin has already begun inside you, not just the act, the desire. Do you see what he is doing? Every single time, Jesus takes a law that governed outward behavior and pushes it into the heart. He is not erasing the old commandments. He is showing that the real battlefield was never just the courtroom or the street. It was always the heart. And then he comes to the 5th one. The one about the cheek. And this time, the thing he quotes sounds harsh, an eye for an eye. And most people assume that law was cruel, that it was God's version of revenge. That assumption is exactly backwards. So let us look at the law he quoted, an eye for an eye. If you grew up hearing that phrase, you probably heard it as a license for revenge. You hurt me, so I hurt you back, exactly the same amount. Fair, balanced, cold. But here is what most people never realize. That law was not a license. It was a leash. Picture an ancient village, 2 families. A fight breaks out. Someone is injured, and now the injured family wants blood. In a culture without police, without courts, you can trust, vengeance was the only justice available. And vengeance has a terrible habit of escalating. You take my eye, I take your eye. But my family takes your brother, and your family takes my son. And within 2 generations, 2 families are locked in a blood feud that nobody can even remember how it started. That is the world the law walked into. And the law said, stop. Exodus chapter 21, verse 24. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. hand for hand, foot for foot. The same command appears in Leviticus chapter 24 and Deuteronomy chapter 19c. And in that world, it was a revolution. It put a ceiling on revenge. You could only take an eye for an eye. Not a life, not a family, not a generation. Not a generation. The ancient world knew this principle. Similar codes existed in Babylon centuries before Israel. But the law of Moses took it and made it the standard for the people of God. Proportional, measured, just. The punishment must fit the crime, not exceed it. That was the whole point. Justice with a governor on it. So when Jesus quotes it, he is not quoting a cruel law. He is quoting a law of restraint, a law that stopped the cycle. And then he does something astonishing. He says the cycle has to stop somewhere. And he points past the law of restraint to something even deeper. But I tell you, don't resist him who is evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. That is Matthew chapter 5, verse 39. Now we are ready to actually look at it, because there is a detail in that verse that most people walk right past. Two things in that sentence deserve your attention. First, the word resist. In the Greek, it is anthistemi. It means to stand against, to oppose, to set yourself in opposition. It is a strong word. Jesus is not saying, never protect yourself. He is saying, do not stand against this person in the way they are, standing against you. Do not answer evil with evil. Do not let the insult dictate your response. And notice, this is not a passive word either. Standing firm is not the same as running away. The command is not let evil walk over you. The command is do not meet evil with the same evil. Second, and this is the detail that changes everything, Jesus says the right cheek. Not the cheek, the right cheek. And in the culture Jesus was speaking to, that detail was not random. In the ancient Near East, the most insulting blow you could receive was not a punch. It was a backhanded slap across the right cheek. The open hand swung from the shoulder, landing on the right side of the face. This was the blow a master gave to a servant. A Roman gave to a Jew. A superior gave to an inferior. It was not about pain. It was about contempt. It was a way of saying, you are beneath me. You do not even deserve a real fight. Now, to be fair, this is cultural background. The text does not spell it out. But commentators have noted it for centuries, and it fits everything we know about that world. And if it is right, then the picture changes completely. Someone backhands you on the right cheek. The insult blow. The blow that says you are nothing. And Jesus says, turn to him the other also. What happens next? Think about the mechanics for a second. You have just been backhanded on the right cheek. The striker is standing in front of you, right hand raised, expecting you to cower, or to run, or to swing back and start the fight he is ready for. And instead, you turn your head. You offer him your left cheek. Now watch what happens. To hit your left cheek with his right hand, he cannot backhand you. The backhand only works on the right side. He would have to hit you with the palm, or with a fist. And those are blows between equals. A fist is what you give a man. A backhand is what you give a dog. By turning the other cheek, you have done something remarkable. You have refused to be treated like a dog. You have refused to run. You have refused to fight. And you have forced the person who insulted you to either stop or to escalate into a real fight between equals, in front of everyone. This is the reading made famous by a scholar named Walter Wink, and it has been enormously influential. And to be honest, scholars do debate how much weight to put on the exact mechanics. Some caution against building too much on the cultural detail. But the detail is worth sitting with. Something is happening in that moment that has nothing to do with cowering. And it is not the same thing as fighting back either. It is a third thing. And Jesus is not done. He gives 3 more examples, and each one moves into a different arena of your life. Matthew chapter 5, verse 40. If anyone sues you to take away your coat, let him have your cloak also. Now, to understand this, you need to know about the 2 garments. In the ancient world, a poor person owned basically 2 pieces of clothing. The inner garment, the tunic, was like a long shirt. The outer garment, the cloak, was a heavy blanket-like robe. It was your coat, your blanket, your shelter. The law actually said you could not keep a man's cloak overnight because he needed it to sleep in. It was that essential. So picture the scene. Someone takes you to court, and the judgment goes against you, and the creditor takes your tunic, your shirt. You are left standing in your underclothes, publicly stripped, humiliated. And Jesus says, "Give him your cloak too." Think about what that means. If you hand over your cloak as well, you are standing there with nothing. In public, in front of everyone. The person who sued you has taken everything you have, and now they have to look at what they have done. The crowd sees it. The shame, the absurdity of it, lands on the one who took everything. Jesus is using extreme language on purpose. He does this all the time. A few verses earlier, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 29, he says, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you." He is not telling people to gouge out their eyes. He is using a shocking image to make a heart-level point unforgettable. The cloak is the same. He is not writing a legal code for lawsuits. He is painting a picture of a person so free from the need to win that they can give away everything and still stand. Then Matthew chapter 5, verse 41. "Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. This one has a very specific background. Roman soldiers had the legal right to compel a civilian to carry their pack for 1 mile. It was the law of the occupation. A soldier could tap any man on the shoulder and say, "Carry this." And you had to. 1 mile. No choice. So picture it. You are walking down the road. A soldier taps you. You take his pack, and for 1 mile, you are his mule. Everyone who sees you knows it. The mile marker comes up, and the soldier expects you to drop the pack and walk away, angry and humiliated, and Jesus says, "Go with him too." Now watch what changes. The 2nd mile is voluntary. The soldier cannot compel it. And when you keep walking, the relationship flips. You are no longer his mule. You are a man who chose to help him. The soldier does not know what to do with that. He is walking next to a person who turned a forced act into a gift. And then the last one, Matthew chapter 5, verse 42. "Give to him who asks you, and don't turn away him who desires to borrow from you." Think about what that looks like. Someone asks, and your first instinct is to calculate. What will this cost me? What do I get back? And Jesus is describing a person whose first instinct is not calculation. It is openness. Not because they are naive, because they know where their provision comes from. The cheek was about your honor. The cloak was about your property. The mile was about your freedom. And this one is about your open hand. A person who is not clutching their rights. A person who is not clutching their rights. Pause for a second and see what has already emerged. The insult, the lawsuit, the occupation, the beggar, 4 different arenas, and in every single one, the same refusal. You do not cower, you do not retaliate. You respond in a way the other person did not expect, and something shifts. But wait, before we go any further, we need to be careful, because there is a danger in reading this as a mechanical rule, a literal law for every situation, and Jesus himself shows us why. Here is something most people never notice. Jesus lived this teaching, and the way he lived it tells you what it actually is. Near the end of his life, Jesus is brought before the high priest. And during the questioning, one of the officers standing nearby slaps him across the face. This is in John chapter 18, and I am summarizing the scene here, not quoting it. Now, if turn the other cheek were a mechanical rule, this would be the moment. The officer has just struck Jesus on the cheek, and Jesus does not turn and offer the other side. Instead, he responds with a question. He says, essentially, if I have spoken wrongly, tell me what I said wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Now, do not miss what is happening. Jesus does not retaliate. He does not hit back. He does not curse the officer. But he also does not passively absorb the blow and invite another one. He answers with dignity. He challenges the injustice. He names what the officer did wrong, calmly, in front of everyone. That is the heart of this teaching. It is not a rule about your face. It is a posture in your heart, a refusal to retaliate, a refusal to be defined by the insult, and a willingness to speak the truth without violence. And here is the thing about that moment. Jesus was not weak in it. Everyone in that room knew who was really in control. The officer could strike his body, but he could not touch his dignity. and he could not make him hate. That is what this teaching produces. A person the world can hurt, but cannot corrupt. So, if it is not a literal rule, what is it? What is Jesus actually asking for? To answer that, we have to see where this whole section ends, because the ending changes everything. Here is the thing about the Sermon on the Mount. You cannot pull one verse out and understand it. You have to see where the argument lands. And this argument lands in the most challenging place in the whole sermon. Because after the cheek, and the cloak, and the mile, Jesus keeps going, and he raises the stakes higher than anyone expected. Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 and 44. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you. There it is. The thing the cheek was pointing at all along. This was never really about your face. It was about your enemies and what you do with the people who hurt you. And then Jesus tells you why. Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. Think about that for a second. The Father's goodness does not discriminate. The sun rises on the person who loves you, and the person who hurt you. The rain falls on the field of the honest farmer, and the field of the cheat. That is what the Father is like. And Jesus says, this is who you are called to become. Children who look like their Father. And then the verse that makes everyone uncomfortable. Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now that word perfect has caused a lot of anxiety, but in the Greek, the word is teleos, and it does not mean flawless. It means complete, mature, whole, grown up. The picture is a person whose love has grown up enough to look like the Father's love. A love that is not limited to people who love you back. And that is the point that makes the whole sermon hang together. The standard is not a scoreboard. It is a family resemblance. You are not trying to be perfect the way you would try to get a perfect grade. You are growing up into the likeness of the Father who has already claimed you as his child. So now the whole section comes into focus. The cheek was never a standalone rule. It was a doorway into the deepest teaching in the sermon. Do not be shaped by how people treat you. Be shaped by who your Father is. And now we can finally answer the question you have probably been holding on to since the beginning. The one this verse always raises. Does this mean I just take it? Does this mean I let people walk all over me? Is this verse telling me to be a doormat? Let us answer that directly. The doormat reading is the most common reading of this verse, and it is almost certainly wrong. And here is why. A doormat does not choose. A doormat does not decide. A doormat is walked on because it cannot do anything else. But look at what Jesus is describing. Every example is a choice. You turn your head, you hand over your cloak, you walk the second mile, you open your hand. None of that is passive. All of it is active, deliberate, chosen. The person in these pictures is not weak. They are the opposite of weak. They are so secure in who they are that an insult cannot move them. They do not need to win the fight because they are not fighting for their worth. They already know their worth. That is the thing the doormat reading gets completely backwards. It reads this verse as, let people treat you like nothing. Jesus is actually saying, refuse to let anyone treat you like nothing, and do it without becoming like them. There is a difference between being walked on and choosing to turn. And this verse is about the second one. And here is the honest part. This kind of strength does not look like strength at first. It looks like losing. The world sees you turn, and the world thinks you lost. But the world does not see what you are carrying. It does not see that you walked away carrying your dignity, and your mercy, and your freedom. But that raises the next question. The one this verse always raises. What about justice? What about self-defense? What about protecting the people you love? If I turn the other cheek, do I just let evil win? Let us be honest about that, because the text has something to say, and it is not what you might expect. Here is what this passage does not say. It does not say that evil should never be stopped. It does not say that courts are wrong. It does not say that you must stay in an abusive situation, or that you can never set a boundary, or that protecting someone else is forbidden. In fact, the New Testament is very clear that God has placed authorities in this world to restrain evil. In Romans chapter 13, Paul writes, and I am summarizing, that the governing authorities bear the sword as servants of God, to punish those who do evil. That is a biblical picture of justice. Courts, police, government. The state does not turn the other cheek. It is not supposed to. It carries the sword. But in Romans chapter 12, just one chapter earlier, Paul writes something else. Repay no one evil for evil. And, don't seek revenge yourselves, beloved, but give place to God's wrath. For it is written, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay, says the Lord. That is Romans chapter 12, verses 17 and 19. Do you see the distinction? Personal retaliation is forbidden. Institutional justice is affirmed. The two are not the same thing. And this passage, the cheek, is about the personal, the face-to-face, the moment when someone insults you, humiliates you, wrongs you, and you feel the hot urge to make them pay. Now, I need to be careful here, because faithful Christians have genuinely differed on how far this teaching extends. Some have read it as universal pacifism, applying to war and self-defense. Others have read it as a teaching about personal relationships, not about the state or about protecting others. The text itself does not directly settle every one of those questions, and it would be dishonest to pretend it does. But here is what the text does say, clearly. The cycle of retaliation has to stop somewhere, and it stops with you. Not with the state. The state has its job. The cycle stops with you in your personal relationships when someone wrongs you and you refuse to become them. And one more thing. This verse has been misused. It has been used to tell victims of abuse to stay silent. It has been used to keep people in harm's way. That is not what Jesus is teaching, and using it that way is a corruption of the text. The heart of this teaching is not that you have no worth. It is that your worth is not up for grabs. So what does this actually look like? Not in the first century, in your life. Right now. Let us go back to that moment from the beginning. The insult that landed, the face that got hot, the voice in your head that said, hit back. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was in a group chat. Maybe it was at a family dinner. You know the one. The comment landed. And in that moment you had a choice. And the choice was not just, do I fight back or not? The choice was deeper. Who is going to define this moment? Who is going to define me? The retaliation instinct says, I will define it. I will hurt them back, and then everyone will see. I am not weak. But here is the trap. When you retaliate, you hand the other person the remote control. They insulted you, and now you are dancing. You are angry, all week. You are rehearsing the comeback at 2 a.m. They moved on. You did not. That is not strength. That is being owned by the insult. The doormat response says, I will just take it. I will swallow it. I will pretend it did not happen. But that is not what Jesus is describing either. Because the doormat response leaves you bitter, and it leaves the cycle unbroken. It just moves the anger underground. The third way, the way Jesus is actually describing, is different. You see the insult for what it is. You do not let it define you. You do not repay it, and you respond out of who you are, not out of what was done to you. That might mean a calm question, like Jesus gave the officer. It might mean a boundary, set without hatred. It might mean walking the second mile, and turning a forced situation into a gift. And here is the part people get wrong about boundaries. A boundary set without hatred is not retaliation. It is the calm question Jesus gave the officer. It is saying, this is not how you treat me, without becoming what you are fighting. The verse never asked you to stop being honest about what was done to you. It asked you not to let what was done to you decide who you become. The turn does not have to be dramatic. Most of the time it will not be. It is the reply you do not send. The comment you do not post. The comeback you let die in your throat. Nobody will ever know you chose it. And that is exactly the point. The turn is between you and the Father. And let us be honest about how hard that is. It is not natural. Every instinct in you wants to answer the insult, to correct the record, to make them feel what you felt. And that is exactly why Jesus did not leave this as a technique. He left it as an identity. You do not do this to prove you are strong. You do it because of whose you are. And here is the thing that makes it possible. You are not doing this alone. You are doing it as a child of the Father. The same Father who sends rain on the just and the unjust. Your worth does not come from winning the argument. It comes from Him, and when you know that, you are free. Free not to cower, free not to retaliate, free to respond like the person you actually are. So the next time someone backhands you on the right cheek, and it will happen, in one form or another, because that is what the world does to people who refuse to play its games, you have a choice: cower, retaliate, or turn. And the turn is not the move of a victim. It is the move of a child of the Father who makes His sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust and the unjust. The insult does not get to decide who you are. The backhand does not get the last word. You do, because you are free. Free enough to turn, free enough to give the cloak, free enough to walk the second mile, and free enough to look at the person who hurt you and refuse to let them make you into what they are. That is what turn the other cheek really means.